Hello and welcome to the CNN-IBN special. In the aftermath of the killing of the 76 Jawans in Dantewada by Maoists, there has been a nationwide debate which has been a polarized one. One argument is argued for maximum force to crush the Maoists. The other argument is about initiating an outreach program, democracy and rehabilitation. Joining us now is Arundhati Roy, author and activist, someone whose recent writings on the Maoists and her open sympathy and empathy for them has created a great degree of debate and controversy. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. You wrote your article, Walking with the Comrades, in Outlook magazine, before Dantewada happened. In the aftermath of Dantewada, do you still stand by the tone of sympathy that you had with the Maoists' cause in that essay?
Well, it's an odd way to frame it, before and after Dantewada happened, because actually, this cycle of violence has been building and building. It's not the first time that a large number of security personnel have been killed by the Maoists, and I've even written about it, about Rani Bodli and the other attacks that took place in between 2005 and 2007. And the way I look at it is often, people try to make it sound like, oh, on this side are the people who are celebrating the killing of the CRPF, and on that side are the people who are asking for the Maoists to be, wiped out. That's not the case. I think that you've got to look at every death as a terrible tragedy in a system, in a war that's being pushed on the people. And that, unfortunately, is becoming a war of the rich against the poor, in which the rich put forward the poorest of the poor to fight the poor. So the CRPF are terrible victims, but they are not just victims of the Maoists. They are victims of a system of structural violence that's taking place that is sought to be drowned in this empty condemnation industry that goes on, which is entirely meaningless, because most of the time the people who condemn them really don't have any sympathy for them. They're just using them as pawns.
But who then will break the cycle of violence? The state argues that the reason why the state has to cleanse the area or sanitize the area, as it's called, is because that whenever it initiates development works or starts schools or builds bridges, those are blown up by the Maoists. Is it that the cycle of violence, according to you, can only be broken by the state, if the state pulls back? Is that what you believe?
Well, there's a simple sort of litmus test for that. Is it the case that there are schools and hospitals and no malnutrition and a lot of development in poor areas where there aren't Maoists? That's not the case. The fact is that even if you look at studies that have been done, let's say by doctors in a place like Bilaspur, what Binayak Sen describes as nutritional AIDS is happening. When you go into these schools, you see that they are used as barracks. They are built as barracks. So to say that the Maoists blow up schools and they are against development is a bit ridiculous.
But you condemn state violence, and the charge against you is that you don't condemn Naxal violence, you don't condemn Maoist violence. In fact, you rationalize it and even romanticize it. That is a charge made against you. And in fact, if I can read from your essay where you've written, I feel I ought to say something about the futility of violence. But what should I suggest they do? Go to court, a rally, a relay hunger strike? That sounds ridiculous. Which party should they vote for? Which democratic institution should they approach? You seem to be saying that non-violence is futile.
Well, this is a strange charge to someone who's been writing about non-violence and non-violent movements for more than 10 years now. But what I saw when I went into the forest was this, that non-violent resistance, though it has actually not worked, not in the Narmada Bachao Andolan and not, let's say, in many other non-violent, even militant movements, it has worked in some parts. Anyway, it doesn't matter, but I'm talking about things like Gandmardhan or occasionally little pockets. But inside the forest, it's a different story, because non-violence, and particularly Gandhian non-violence, in some ways needs an audience. It's a theater that needs an audience. But inside the forest, there's no audience. When 1,000 police come and surround a forest village in the middle of the night, what are they to do? And how are the hungry to go on a hunger strike? How are people with no money to boycott taxes or foreign goods or do consumer boycotts? They have nothing. So I do see the violence inside that forest as a counter-violence, as a violence of resistance, and I do feel terrible about the fact that there is this increasing cycle of violence, that the more weapons the government arms the police with, those weapons end up with the Maoist PLGA. It's a terrible thing to do to any society, and I don't think there's any romance in it. However, I'm not against romance, and I do feel it's incredible that these poor people are standing up against this mighty state that is sending thousands and thousands of paramilitary. I mean, what are they doing in that forest against those people with AK-47s and grenades and thousands of rounds?
But the Maoists have AK-47s too. They have SLRs too. They have pressure bombs too.
They've snatched their AKs from the cops.
Should people like you not be raising their voices against the cycle of violence, or should you actually be trying to find rationalizations for it? Because you've been called an apologist for the Maoists. The BJP has called you the sophisticated face of Naxalism. If you don't raise your voice against their violence and simply see it as a morally acceptable, as a morally legitimate counter to the state, then
I understand.
Then are you not actually failing as a member of civil society?
No, I'm not, because I think it suits the status quo right now to have everybody saying, oh, this is terrible and this is also terrible, so let's just keep on, without taking into account the terrible structural violence that is actually, I don't use this word lightly, but actually creating a genocidal situation in those tribal areas. If you look at the levels of malnutrition, if you look at the levels of absolute abject desperation there, any responsible person has to say the violence will stop when you stop pushing those people. When you have a whole community of tribals, which, by the way, is a population larger than the population of most countries, which is on the very brink of survival, which is fighting its own annihilation. I cannot equate their reaction, their resistance to the violence of the state. I think it's immoral to equate the two.
Okay, let's bring you to the other point in your essay where you're particularly harsh on Gandhi. You said the party Charu Majumdar founded had kept the dream of revolution real and present in India. Imagine a society without that dream. For that alone, we cannot judge him too harshly, especially not while we swaddle ourselves with Gandhi's pious humbug about the superiority of non-violent way and his notion of trusteeship. That's number one.
Well,
you also say, do you know what to do if we come under fire? Sukhdev asks. Yes, I immediately declare an indefinite hunger strike. He sat down on a rock and laughed. And you then say, should I write a play? I wonder, Gandhi, get your gun, or will I be lynched? Do you feel that Gandhi is a figure to be mocked?
I think that there are some things about Gandhi which do deserve to be mocked. And I think there are some things about him that deserve a great deal of respect, particularly his ideas of consumption and minimalist living and sustainable living. However, let me read what he said in his thing of trusteeship. This is a quote of his notion of trusteeship. The rich man will be left in possession of his wealth, of which he will use what he reasonably requires for his personal needs, and will act as a trustee for the remainder to be used for the good of society. I think that's a statement to be mocked. You know, and I have no problem mocking it.
In a lecture in the US in March at the Left Forum, you said India is a fake democracy. That ties in with your justification or your quasi-justification of violence to some extent. Do you feel that because Indian democracy is fake, there is no hope that Indian democracy holds out to the Maoists?
No, certainly I feel that India is an oligarchy, where it does work as a democracy for the middle classes and the upper classes.
But it's a fake democracy.
Yeah, therefore, because it doesn't work for the mass of the people, it's a fake democracy. So you have institutions which have been hollowed out. You have institutions to which the poor have no access. And when you look at the institutions of democracy, which is not, I don't think we have the time, but if you look at elections, you look at the court, you look at the media, you look at the judiciary, you have a very, very dangerous system building, which is increasingly excluding a vast section of the poorer people in this country. And that's why I say it's fake. It works for some and it doesn't work for others. Depending on where you want to place your feet, your politics is defined. You know, if you stand in Greater Kailash, sure, it's a great and vibrant democracy. If you stand in Dantewada, it is no democracy at all. You have a chief minister who basically said that those who don't come out of the forest and live in Salvajurum camps are terrorists. So looking after your chickens and tending to your fields is a terrorist act. Is that democracy?
If you had to come up with a solution to this, what would your solution be? What would your way be to break the deadlock?
Well, two things. You know, first, on a philosophical level, I would say that I don't believe that the imagination that has brought the planet to this crisis is going to come up with an alternative. So the least we can do is to stop annihilating those who we think of as keepers of our past, but could be people who have the wisdom of the future. That's one. But on Operation Green Hunt, I would just say 2 or 3 things. You know, one is I think that the government should come clean on all these MOUs and infrastructure projects, declare them, tell us what they are, freeze them for now. Insist that all the villagers that have been pushed out, we are talking of hundreds of thousands of people, be rehabilitated. That these cordon and search operations, these police and paramilitary, they are combing the forest with guns, be pulled back into their barracks. Those 3 things, and then hopefully, you know, something begins to emerge.
But if I could just ask you a related question. Every country uses mineral resources to grow, and growth is something that our country needs. The present dispensation in the Maoists, earlier they used to strike deals with POSCO. The rate of compensation was 30 lakh per year that POSCO used to pay to the Maoists. Now it's no deals, all bets are off, it's just confrontation. So are you advocating that all projects from all those areas should just wind up and go?
You see, what's happening now with the privatization of the mining industry is that there's a very sort of false understanding that mining is going to push up the growth. It will push it up in a strange way, which has nothing to do with real development. But if you look at the royalties that the government gets, it's like for iron ore, 27 rupees for 5,000 rupees a ton profit for the private company. So we are paying with our ecology for other people's economies. You know, so it's a myth, this thing of growth.
Let's take a short break and come back. Welcome back to the CNN-IBN special. We're talking to Arundhati Roy about her writings on Maoism and the debate and controversy that they have generated and her solutions to the Maoist problem, as it's called. Are you willing to mediate between the Maoists and the government? Because they have put your name forward as well as the name of Kabir Suman to mediate, but you have declined. But what are you afraid of? Why don't you go ahead and mediate?
I'm afraid of myself. You know, these are not my skills. I don't know how to. I wouldn't know how to do that. I don't trust myself in that. You know, you can't, if you're a basketball player, you can't be a swimmer, you know. So I think there are people who would do a good job, but I don't think I am one of them. But first of all, I think one question that we have to ask is, who do we mean when we say Maoists? And who does the Operation Green Hunt want to target? Because for sure, you know, there's this kind of discrete separation being made that here are the Maoists and here are the tribals. Or on the other hand, people saying, oh, the Maoists represent the tribals, neither of which is true. The fact is that about 99% of the Maoists are tribals, but all tribals are not Maoists. Mm-hmm. But still, the numbers run into the tens of thousands of people who would officially call themselves Maoists. Among them, 90,000 women belong to the women's organization. 10,000 belong to the cultural organization. So are they all going to be wiped out? You know, wiped out.
What is your message to Chidambaram? What kind of message would you like to give to Chidambaram? Do you think that he's fighting this war on ego?
I think he's fighting it on hubris, and I think he's fighting it with an imagination that is chained to the corporate companies that he once served. to Enron, to Vedanta, to all the companies that he represented. No, I'm not necessarily accusing him of being corrupt. I'm accusing him of having an imagination that's colonized by corporations and that is driving this country into a very, very serious situation that's going to affect all of us.
Are you worried about the case that's been filed against you? There has been a complaint filed against you under the Chhattisgarh Special Powers Act. And the police are investigating that for lending support to the Maoists after your article. Are you worried about state persecution?
Obviously, I mean, I'd be a ghoul not to be worried, but I won't be the first one they've gone after. And I think what they're trying to do is to send out a warning to people, because I think they're planning to intensify this war. I think we're going to see drone attacks on the poorest people of this country, and they're trying to cordon off the theater of war and trying to warn people who might have a different view from that of the government not to go in there.
Why do you think your writings are as controversial as they are? Why does India love to hate Arundhati Roy? Why is there so much hate mail directed at you? Why do people feel that you say things people don't agree with? Why are you the writer that India loves to hate?
Well, I think it's very presumptuous of you to represent India. You know, the people who, I mean, I feel the opposite. I feel like somebody who's embraced wherever I go, whether it's to Orissa, whether it's to Narmada. It's just the people with the voice, the people with a huge stake in the things I'm writing about, where that stake is threatened, that hate me. But if I did feel that the whole of India hated me, I'd be doing something terribly wrong. You know, as a political writer, I'd be crazy to carry on doing what I'm doing. The fact is that I feel very deeply loved. That's the real issue.
But do you think there is a problem? Do you think the government, the media, the kind of dominant culture is targeting intellectuals and is targeting people as human rights activists? And is this dangerous for India?
Of course it's very dangerous, because, you know, yesterday I think there was an article, Dantewada comes to Delhi. And it has come to Delhi. In the charge sheet against Gobar Gandhi, the People's Union for Civil Liberties, the People's Union for Democratic Rights, old institutions are being now called front organizations, you know. There is this kind of manic, barracuda-like, you know, accusation to anyone who has a different point of view that they are Maoists. Hundreds of people who are not known have been picked up and jailed. And there's a whole bandwidth of people's movements, from the non-violent ones outside the forest to the armed struggles inside the forest, which have actually collectively held off this corporate assault, which I have to say I don't think has happened anywhere else in the world.
Let me just ask you something that a viewer wrote to me. When I see a 16-year-old with a gun, I would feel scared and I would mourn that. Why does Arundhati Roy look at a 16-year-old with a gun and celebrate it and say, she's so beautiful, she has a lovely smile?
Because if I saw a 16-year-old being raped by a CRPF man and watching her village being burnt and watching her parents being killed and submit to it, I would mourn that. When I see one standing up and saying, I'm going to fight this, I feel terrible. I think it's a terrible thing that it should come to that, but it's better than having her accept annihilation.
Let me just read out some of the criticisms that have been made against you by fellow thinkers and activists who said she equates their cynical quest for power with genuine demands, rights and concerns of the people who live in the forest. She gives new meaning to the binary logic of us and them, something she ridiculed George W. Bush for. She is at the moment a victim of the Stockholm Syndrome, and in other parlances she would be described as an embedded journalist. How do you react to this criticism?
Well, I think, you know, to start from the end, embedded is not in itself a bad thing. It depends on who you're embedded with. Are you embedded with the corporates, as most of the media is? Or are you embedded with the side that sees itself resisting this? And here I don't refer to the Maoists, you know. Who are the Maoists? Of course, the Maoist ideologues very openly say that it is their aim to overthrow the Indian state, when the people who form their fighting forces don't know what the Indian state is. They don't know what the next district is. And what they are fighting for is not that, I don't think. but surely there's a coincidence of aims at the moment. Both are using each other. It's not that the ideologues are using the tribal people are also using the ideologues to fight a very annihilating war at the moment. But having said that, I want to say that the Maoists are not the only people who are trying to overthrow the Indian state. The Indian state has been overthrown already by the Hindutva project and by the corporate project. So there are many people.
So you believe the
frame.
Constitution has ceased to exist?
Not ceased to, but I believe that has been. I believe it's been deeply weakened.
So the Constitution has ceased to exist. India is a fake democracy. We need to overthrow Gandhi and his teachings. The media is corrupted. Do you ever think of giving up on India and going and living somewhere else?
Absolutely not. I mean, for me, that's the challenge. That's the beauty, that's the wonder, because the people in this country are staging the most spectacular struggle anywhere in the world. I feel so proud, and so I really salute them for what's going on here. I mean, I belong here. Even if CSPSA wants to be putting me in jail, I'll not be going to live in Switzerland.
Arundhati Roy, thanks very much indeed for joining us.